My wife cheated on me with her boss, stole $200, $0 from our joint account, and now she's claiming we owe her when we're fighting over the house worth $1, $2 million, all while acting like she's the victim and I'm the villain. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, with my whole world turned upside down. It all started with little signs, things I brushed off at first. My wife, Sarah, had been acting a little different lately, more distant, secretive about her phone, and always leaving the room quickly when I entered. At first, I thought maybe she was just stressed at work or dealing with something personal. She's always been a bit bitchy and stubborn, so I figured I was just imagining things. But then things started to add up. One evening, I decided to check our joint bank account out of curiosity. I wasn't planning to do anything, just wanted to see if everything was okay since Sarah had been mentioning some money issues she was worried about. I noticed a strange transfer 200, gone. That's when my stomach clenched. I looked closer, and it turned out she'd been siphoning off money over the past few months, slowly but surely. I couldn't believe it. That's a quarter of our savings just evaporated. I felt sick. How could she do this? How could she steal that much money from us? I'd always trusted Sarah. We'd been married for 7 years and I thought we had a good life. Nice house, decent jobs, a kid we both loved. But now I realized she'd been lying to my face the entire time. When I confronted her about the missing money, she brushed it off, saying she'd been saving it for a rainy day, and that I was overreacting. She had the nerve to call me paranoid, accuse me of not trusting her. She even claimed I was being unfair, that I was just jealous of her success at work, which was a lie. She's not successful. She's just a secretary at a marketing firm, but she's always acted like she's the hottest thing in town. That bitch. And then I found out she'd been having an affair with her boss, David. I saw messages on her phone, flirty texts, explicit photos, plans to meet up after hours. I was stunned. My wife, my partner, cheating on me with her boss. It was like a punch to the gut. I didn't want to believe it at first. I thought maybe I was overreacting or misreading the signs, but the evidence was undeniable. I saw her message him about meeting up later for some fun, and how she needed a release after a stressful week. She always plays the victim, acts like she's the one wrong, but this was her betrayal, right there in black and white. I remember the moment I saw those messages. I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone and I saw a notification pop up. It was a message from David, something about a hotel room and a special night. My heart stopped. I felt cold all over. I couldn't believe she'd be so blatant about it. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and pure heartbreak. This wasn't just a fling. This was her cheating, stealing from us, and lying straight to my face. I felt like I was losing my mind. How could she do this? How could she betray everything we built? I knew I had to confront her. I waited until she came home. That evening, when she walked in, she looked at me with that smirk, like she knew she had the upper hand. I was furious. I told her I knew everything, the money, the affair. She dismissed it all, said I was overreacting, that I was a jealous husband who couldn't handle her success and her independence. She called me insecure, pathetic even, and then she started crying, acting like the victim. She said she was just stressed, that David was just a friend, and that I was making a big deal out of nothing. But I knew better. I saw through her lies. The emotional impact hit me hard. I was angry, yes, but also hurt beyond words. I had trusted her, loved her, built a life with her, and now I felt like a fool. How could she do this? How could she betray me, steal from us, and then turn around and play the victim? I felt betrayed, humiliated, and confused. I didn't know what to do. I was drowning in a sea of betrayal, trying to process how someone I loved could turn out to be so selfish, so manipulative. I felt like I was losing control of everything I once believed in, but I knew one thing: I couldn't just let this go. I had to think clearly about what to do next. I couldn't let her get away with it, not just the money, but the lies, the affair, the entire betrayal. I decided I'd gather evidence, figure out how deep this went, and then confront her again, only this time with a plan. I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. I was done being played. The next step was figuring out how to fight back, how to get my life back in order, and how to make her pay for what she'd done. After that night, everything changed. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing through all the lies, the stolen money, the explicit messages. I felt betrayed on every level, emotionally, financially, and morally. I knew I had to act fast. I started digging deeper into her phone, her emails, her bank accounts. I needed concrete proof, something undeniable that I could use to confront her again or even take legal action if it came to that. Over the next few days, I found more disturbing evidence. Hidden messages with David, plans for trips, even receipts from hotels, places. She'd been meeting him. The amount of money she'd taken. It wasn't just petty theft, it was calculated, deliberate with her trying to cover her tracks. I also discovered she'd been making transfers to her personal accounts, trying to hide the money she stole. She'd been planning this, I was sure of it. Meanwhile, she kept up her act, acting like she was the victim. She'd call me paranoid, accuse me of harassment, and say I was just jealous of her success. She even had the nerve to claim I was controlling her. I couldn't believe her audacity. She's the one sneaking around, lying, stealing, and now she's trying to paint herself as the wronged wife. That was the last straw. I realized I needed to confront her again, but this time I would be prepared. One afternoon, I sat her down, showing her the evidence I'd gathered. I told her I knew everything about her affair with David, the stolen money, the lies she'd been spinning. Her face twisted into a sneer, and she started to deny everything, even though I had proof. She told me I was crazy, that I was making things up, that I was just jealous and insecure. She called me paranoid and possessive, trying to gaslight me, but I wasn't falling for it. I had the receipts, the messages, the bank statement. I knew the truth. Her reaction was classic, bitchy, defensive, and manipulative. She said I was overreacting, that I was just angry because she was more successful than me, or because I was insecure about her career. She claimed she loved me, that she'd never cheat or steal from me, and that I was just jealous of her boss, David. But I could see right through her lies. She kept crying, acting like a victim, trying to turn the tables. It was infuriating. She's such a master at playing the victim, she always has been. That confrontation hit me hard. I felt a mix of sadness and fury. I loved her once, but now I saw her for who she really was, selfish, manipulative, and unfaithful. I felt like I'd been sucker punched, like I'd been living a lie all these years. I wondered how I could have missed the signs, how I could have trusted someone so completely and been betrayed so thoroughly. It was like my whole world was crumbling around me. I thought about everything, the house, the money, our future, and I realized I couldn't just sweep this under the rug anymore. The emotional toll was brutal. I kept replaying everything, her sneaky behavior, her lies, her betrayal. I felt stupid for trusting her, for believing in us. I was angry at her, but also deeply hurt. I felt like I'd been played for a fool, used and discarded. I kept asking myself how she could do this to me, to our family. I kept thinking about the money she stole, how she thought she could get away with it, and how she'd lied about everything. It was overwhelming, but I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living like this. I had to figure out what was next, whether to fight for the marriage or cut my losses. I knew I wouldn't let her get away with it all, her affair, her theft, her lies. I was furious, yes, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I needed to protect myself and our son. I decided I'd start by consulting a lawyer, gathering more evidence, and preparing for whatever came next. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. I was going to be the one in control. Now I'm sitting here trying to process everything, wondering how I got to this point. I never expected my life to turn into a nightmare like this, but I also know I can't keep pretending it's okay. The betrayal runs too deep. I've learned that trust is fragile, and once broken, it's almost impossible to repair. The question now is, what do I do about her? How do I rebuild after this mess? And most of all, how do I move on from someone who lied, cheated, and stole from me, someone I once loved? After that confrontation, I knew I couldn't just sit around and do nothing. I started to plan my next move carefully. I wasn't about to let her walk all over me, especially after finding out she'd stolen $200, $0 from our joint account and was sleeping with her boss behind my back. I had to get my ducks in a row. The first thing I did was hire a lawyer. I wanted to know exactly where I stood legally, especially with the house, which was worth over $1 million. I needed to be prepared for whatever legal battle was coming. In the meantime, I also decided I'd gather every piece of evidence I could, screenshots of her messages, bank statements, receipts, anything that could prove her infidelity and theft. I couldn't trust her to tell the truth, and I knew she'd lie her way out of everything. She was good at twisting things, making herself the victim, and I didn't want to fall for any more of her manipulations. My wife, Sarah, was still acting like she was the victim, crying, saying I was crazy, accusing me of being controlling. She kept insisting she loved me and that her affair with David was just a mistake she'd made under stress. She told me I was just jealous of her success, that I was insecure, and that I didn't understand her. She even claimed that I was the one who was cheating on her with my obsession over the money and her secretive behavior. Honestly, it was exhausting listening to her spin her lies. She's always been good at playing the victim, but this time I wasn't buying it. I also found out that she'd been making payments to an account that I didn't know about. I traced it back to her, and it turned out she'd been hiding a significant chunk of the stolen money there. That was the confirmation I needed that she'd planned this out. She wasn't just impulsively stealing, she was orchestrating a full-blown scam. I knew I had to act fast. I started documenting everything: her bank transfers, her messages with David, her attempts to cover her tracks. I wanted to be ready for the fight ahead. Meanwhile, her behavior was only getting more bitchy and aggressive. She'd lash out at me, call me paranoid, say I was overreacting. She accused me of not trusting her and say I was being unreasonable. But I couldn't ignore the facts anymore. The evidence was piling up, and I was starting to see her true character emerge: selfish, manipulative, and willing to destroy everything we had for her own benefit. One day, I decided to confront her again, armed with everything I'd gathered. I sat her down and laid it all out: the bank statements, the messages, the receipts. Her face went pale. She tried to deny everything at first, but I showed her the proof. That's when she exploded into a rage, screaming that I was ruining her life, that I was just jealous of her success, and that she'd never do anything to hurt our family. She called me a controlling asshole, accused me of trying to trap her, and claimed I was the one who was cheating on her, on our marriage. The irony was sickening. Her reaction made me realize how deep her manipulation ran. She's always been good at gaslighting, twisting stories, and making herself look innocent. But I saw through her now. I saw her for what she was: a liar and a thief who was willing to destroy everything just to get what she wanted. I felt a cold fury inside me. I had been naive, trusting her for so long, but no more. I was done being her fool. I told her she needed to leave. I didn't want her in my house anymore. I told her if she wanted to stay, she'd have to face the consequences, pay back the money, face the legal fallout, and accept that our marriage was over. She yelled, cried, and tried to guilt-trip me, but I stood my ground. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. She's always been good at making herself the victim, but I refused to be played anymore. That day, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief because I finally saw her for who she really was, and sadness because I loved her once, and now I was losing everything. I realized that trust, once broken, is almost impossible to repair. The betrayal cut too deep, but I also knew I had to move forward, protect myself, my son, and whatever little dignity I had left. I decided to start the process of separating, to get the house appraised, and to prepare for a long, messy legal fight. I've learned a lot through all this, about trust, betrayal, and how people can surprise you in the worst ways. I never thought I'd be in this position, facing such a complete collapse of my marriage. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I've got a lot of work to do, and I know the road ahead won't be easy. But I'm no longer willing to be the victim of her lies and schemes. I'm taking control of my life now, even if it means tearing everything apart to do it. The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations, emotional chaos, and trying to keep my life from spiraling further out of control. I spent hours with my lawyer, going over every detail, every piece of evidence I had collected. We discussed how to approach the divorce, the division of assets, and most importantly, how to protect myself from her attempts to claim I owed her money or that she was the victim. She was already spinning her story, trying to paint herself as the wronged wife, the one who was just misunderstood, and I knew she'd try to manipulate the courts and anyone else who would listen. Meanwhile, Sarah was still living in the house, acting like she owned the place. She kept trying to guilt me, saying I was ruining her life, that I was forcing her out because I was insecure or jealous. She'd cry, scream, and throw tantrums, claiming she was the victim, again. I couldn't believe how she'd flipped the script. She's always been good at playing the victim, but this time I saw right through it. She's just a manipulative, selfish woman who thought she could get away with everything. One day, she came into my office, her face twisted with anger. "You think you're so smart, do you?" she spat. "You're just mad because I had a better job than you and now you're trying to ruin me." I looked at her with cold eyes. "No, Sarah, I'm mad because you stole from us, cheated on me, and lied right to my face. That's what this is about." She scoffed and said I was just jealous of her success, that I was insecure and threatened by her. I couldn't believe her. She's always been a master at twisting things around, making herself look innocent, and I was sick of it. The worst part was knowing she was claiming I owed her money. She's now trying to say I'm the one who's been abusive, controlling, and that I owe her for all her sacrifices. She claims I've been emotionally abusive because I questioned her, and that she deserves compensation for all the stress she's been under. It was so absurd I almost laughed. I knew she'd do anything to avoid taking responsibility for her actions, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I decided to turn the tables. I started documenting her every move, every lie, every attempt to manipulate the situation. I installed cameras in the house just to have proof of her behavior. I also hired a private investigator to look into her financial dealings and her relationship with David. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that she'd been planning this for months, stealing money, cheating, and trying to cover her tracks. I was furious that she thought she could just walk away and turn everything around to her advantage. At the same time, I was trying to stay composed for my son's sake. He's only 5 and I didn't want him to see the chaos. I made sure to keep things as normal as possible, even though inside I felt like I was falling apart. I kept reminding myself that I had to be strong for him. I also started talking to friends and family, people I trusted, to get their advice and support. I was surprised how many people knew bits and pieces of what was going on and how they encouraged me to fight for what's right. Throughout this whole ordeal, Sarah kept playing the victim. She'd say I was ruining her life, that I was a monster for exposing her, and she'd cry about how hard it was to be abandoned. She's always been good at manipulating people, playing the helpless wife while secretly scheming behind the scenes, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew her game now. I saw her for what she was, a liar, a thief, and an emotional manipulator, and I was determined to prove it. One particular day, I finally got a copy of her phone records from my lawyer. I combed through them and found even more evidence of her affair with David, texts, photos, plans to meet up. It was like a punch to the stomach all over again. I realized she'd been lying to everyone, including her own family, about her stress and working late. She'd been sneaking around, betraying me and stealing from us all at the same time. The betrayal was staggering. How could someone be so selfish, so manipulative? It was a question I kept asking myself. I also learned that she'd been secretly transferring money to her personal accounts, trying to hide it from the bank and from me. She thought she was so clever, but I had her figured out now. I knew this wasn't just a moment of weakness or a mistake, it was a full-blown betrayal, a calculated scheme to take everything from us. The house, our savings, our family. She was willing to destroy it all for her own greed and selfishness. I've come to realize that I can't fix this, not anymore. I can fight, I can gather evidence, and I can try to hold her accountable, but the damage is done. The trust is shattered beyond repair. I have no choice but to move on, even if it hurts like hell. I'm starting to accept that her version of victim is just another lie, another way to twist things to her advantage. The truth is, she's the villain here, and I need to protect myself and my son from her chaos. I'm preparing for the legal battles ahead, knowing that the road will be long and painful, but I'm not backing down. I refused to be the fool in her game anymore. The legal process has been a nightmare, but I knew I had to see it through. I spent countless hours with my lawyer, going over every detail of the evidence I'd collected, her bank statements, the messages, receipts, everything that proved her deceit. We prepared the paperwork for the divorce, focusing on the division of assets, especially the house. It's worth over $1.2 million, and I knew she'd try to claim she owned part of it, even though I was the one who bought it. She kept insisting that she deserved her share, claiming she contributed, even though she'd stolen most of our savings and cheated on me. Sarah, of course, was still playing the victim. She'd show up at the house, acting like she was innocent and hurt, crying about how I was trying to ruin her life. She'd scream that I was controlling and that I was making her out to be a villain. But I knew her tricks now. I had the evidence to back up everything. I also hired a forensic accountant to trace her financial movements, seeing the transfers, the hidden accounts, the money she'd stolen. It was eye-opening. She thought she was so clever, hiding everything, but I had her figured out. One afternoon, she barged into my office, face flushed with rage. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" she spat. "You're just jealous because I had a better job than you. You're trying to ruin me because I do. Need you anymore." I looked at her coldly. "Sarah, you stole from us, cheated on me, and lied to my face. You think I don't see what you're doing? This isn't about jealousy, this is about justice." Her eyes narrowed and she started to cry again, trying to guilt-trip me, saying I was a terrible husband, that I was controlling, and that I was just too insecure to handle her success. The truth was, I was done with her manipulations. I'd had enough. I told her she needed to leave the house permanently. I couldn't have her living under the same roof anymore, not after everything she'd done. She screamed, called me a monster, and accused me of trying to take everything from her. But I was resolute. I had evidence, witnesses, and a clear mind. I wasn't going to let her destroy what little stability I had left. The court date was set. I remember feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I knew I was finally getting some clarity, some justice. Dread because I knew the fight wasn't over, and I was about to face a woman who had no qualms about lying and manipulating her way out of everything. I also knew she'd try to claim she was the victim, that I was the one who was abusive or controlling. But I had the proof, her messages, her financial records, her own words, so I felt confident. When we finally went before the judge, she did her best to spin her story. She cried, played the victim, and tried to make herself look innocent. She claimed she was forced into a corner, that I was controlling and abusive, and that she deserved everything she was claiming. I stayed quiet, just presenting the evidence I had. The judge looked at the facts, listened to both sides, and eventually made a ruling. The house was awarded to me, and she was ordered to pay back the stolen money, plus damages for her infidelity and theft. It was a hard-fought victory, but it felt good to finally have some justice after all the lies and betrayal. But even with the legal victory, I knew things wouldn't go back to normal. I was emotionally drained, and the scar of her betrayal would stay with me forever. I had to rebuild my life from scratch. I sold off some of the assets, things I didn't need, and started focusing on my son and myself. I moved out of the house into a smaller place and began therapy to process everything. The pain of losing someone I loved, someone I trusted, was overwhelming, but I knew I had to keep going. Looking back, I realize how much I learned. Trust is fragile, and betrayal can come from the most unexpected places. I learned that people are capable of incredible manipulation, and that sometimes you have to fight tooth and nail just to get back what's yours. The biggest lesson: never ignore the signs and always protect yourself, financially, emotionally, and legally. I've become more cautious, more guarded, but also more aware of what's really important: my integrity, my family, and my future. I don't regret fighting for what's right, even if it shattered my world for a while. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize what truly matters. Now that everything has settled, I find myself sitting here, reflecting on what's happened and what I've learned. Honestly, it's been the worst experience of my life, losing my wife, my trust, and a huge chunk of our savings. But it's also been a wake-up call. I realized that no matter how much you love someone, You can't ignore the signs of betrayal. Trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild, and sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to cut ties completely. I've come to understand that people are capable of incredible deception when they think they can get away with it. Sarah's actions, stealing, lying, cheating, showed her true character. It hurt like hell to see someone I loved so deeply turn out to be so selfish and manipulative. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I fought for my rights, for the truth, and for my future. It wasn't easy and I still have scars, but I know I did what I had to do. Moving forward, I've committed myself to rebuilding. I focus on my son, making sure he feels loved and secure. I've cut out toxic influences and started to trust my instincts more. I don't let people walk all over me anymore. I also learned to be more cautious with money. Never again will I ignore the warning signs or let someone manipulate me financially. I've become more vigilant, more prepared to face whatever life throws at me. As for Sarah, I don't harbor hate, only a deep disappointment. I hope she finds whatever it is she's looking for, but I also know I can't be part of her future anymore. I've accepted that some betrayals are too big to fix, and the only way to heal is to let go and move on. It's painful, but it's necessary. Ultimately, this whole ordeal has taught me that life can be incredibly cruel, but it also shows you what you're truly made of. I've learned that even in the darkest moments, there's a chance to start over, to rebuild trust in yourself, to find strength you didn't know you had, and to create a new path, one that doesn't include lies, theft, or betrayal. I'm not the same person I was before, but I'm better for it. I've learned to value myself more, to stand firm, and to never let anyone undermine me again. So if anyone out there is going through something similar, just know that you're not alone. It's okay to feel broken, angry, or lost, but don't forget, you have the power to take back control, to fight for what's right, and to build a life that's honest and true. Trust is fragile, but resilience is stronger. And in the end, the truth always finds a way to come out.